saw what is laminar flow, what is turbulent flow, and what is transitional flow. So we talked about laminar and we talked about turbulent flow. Now we want to ask the question now, when is a flow through a pipe laminar and when is it turbulent? Like, is there some practical test or calculation or condition or situation that you can describe which will allow you to decide whether a given flow is laminar or turbulent? Now the brute force way to do this is, you are thinking of a flow, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, just observing the flow. If you have a pipe flow, you stick a velocity probe at a given point, you record the velocity as a function of time, and then see for yourself whether it looks like this, which will make it turbulent, or it looks like this, which will make it laminar. You could do the experiment, but doing the experiment all the time is not the point. It's very costly, it's not possible for everyone to do this, and it's practically useless. Like, in the sense, if you have to do an experiment to say something, then that means you don't understand it at all. You just are relying on the data to tell you what it is. On the other hand, if we think about the problem, or if we think about the fluid flow, then we can come up with some practical conditions to understand the flow velocity. Now, in an example problem in the previous unit on dimensional analysis, we saw that let's say the pressure drop between two sections, that is, if you consider two particular sections, if the pressure here is P1, here it's P2 in this section, you can consider delta P to be equal to P2 minus P1. From experimentation, it is known that delta P depends on, is some function of the flow's average velocity, the diameter, the density. I'll just say V for average velocity, diameter, density, and the nature of the fluid, the viscosity. It is known that if you vary any of these four, you would change the pressure drop across a pipe section. Okay, this is something that's been known. Now, in some experiments, it is also seen that the relative roughness of the pipe on the inside, like if you think of the roughness, we define epsilon as the mean squared value of the height of the bumps. Okay, mean squared roughness. Okay, it also depends on epsilon to an extent. That's also been known from experiments. So all I'm saying is, somebody did the experiment and they found out, and they are telling you that the pressure drop depends on velocity, diameter, density, viscosity, and roughness. Now, if you do your dimensional analysis that we described in the previous unit, okay, if you do that dimensional analysis, what you will find out is that the delta P divided by rho V squared, okay, the pressure drop normalized by rho V squared is a function of this dimensionless number, which we will call as rho V d over mu, okay, and epsilon over d. If you do the analysis, you will get this. I'm just telling you that. And this particular parameter here is called the Reynolds number. Reynolds number has sort of a central importance in the study of fluid mechanics, because it is a very useful dimensionless group that appears in almost every flow situation that you will encounter. So Reynolds number, let's look at it and discuss it to understand how it is a marker. It is a marker to tell whether a flow is laminar or turbulent. It is a marker or indicator. Okay, let's see how that is. So if you think about this Reynolds number itself, if you think about the Reynolds number, this is rho V d over mu. Rho V d over mu. Okay. Now think about a flow. Okay. Think about a little volume V. Think about a little volume V. If the fluid here is flowing with some velocity, and we know that if V is the average velocity, average means it's a reasonable descriptor of all the values that you will find in this domain. We can say its velocity scales with V. Okay. Again, the fluid density is rho. Okay. So if you take that tiny blob of volume V, what is the mass of that volume? That would be rho times V. And to denote that this is tiny, so instead of using V with a dash, I'll just use delta V. Delta V, rho delta V is the mass of fluid that is in that tiny blob of fluid, okay, that we are considering. If you take mass times velocity squared, what do we get? That would be kinetic energy. So I'll write it step by step. So if we take a tiny blob of fluid whose volume is delta V, then rho times delta V would be its mass, and rho times delta V times V squared would be proportional to its kinetic energy of the fluid. I'm not saying half rho V squared simply because the velocity itself is not exact. It could be a factor of 2 here and there, or a factor of here and there, but mass times velocity squared should be proportional to the kinetic energy. Okay, so the kinetic energy of the fluid can be thought of as rho delta V times V squared. Okay, this is the kinetic energy of the fluid. It's trying to flow in this direction, so we would say it's the motion, or it's the energy associated with its motion along the axis. Okay, if you think of the other direction, that is the perpendicular direction, the fluid here at the surface is at rest. Velocity is 0 at the wall. We call it no slip condition. There is no slip between the wall and the fluid. The fluid has the same velocity as the wall being at rest. The fluid at the wall is also at rest. We call it no slip condition. It's very important. V equals 0. So here it is, V equals 0. So I'll write it here. At the surface you have V equals 0. Towards the center line you have something, let's say it is equal to V, some non-zero value. Okay, some non-zero value. So if you think of this distance, this is the radius, which is half the diameter. Radius, which is half the diameter. Okay. Now if you think about what is the velocity gradient, that is, if you just think simply, here is 0, here is V, so the change in velocity divided by change in distance should be equal to V minus 0 divided by d by 2 minus 0. Okay, change in velocity over change in position, which is what we call as the velocity gradient. That is, whatever the velocity gradient is, it should scale with V over t. And I'm leaving this factor 2 out. It should scale with V over t. By scale I mean it should be of the same order of magnitude or similar magnitude to V over t. Okay. Now What do you know about viscosity or shear stress? You know that shear stress is viscosity times the velocity gradient. And you know that du over dr scales as v over d, so we can write the shear stress scales as viscosity times v over d. Viscosity times v velocity divided by distance. Okay, so recall rho delta v times v squared is the kinetic energy of the fluid, and we have established the shear stress, the nominal shear stress experienced by the fluid is mu v over d. It's not exactly mu v over d, remember that. It's of the similar magnitude of mu v over d. Okay? So now if I take tau, okay, if I take tau and multiply it by the volume that I am considering, the volume of the blob that I am considering, this shear stress multiplied by volume, look at this quantity. Shear stress is Newton per meter squared and volume is meter cube, which gives you units of Newton meter, which is the same unit as energy. This tau times delta W is interpreted as the amount or the energy that is dissipated by viscous shear stress. Tau times delta V is the energy that is dissipated by viscous shear stress, and I highlight the word dissipated because what is dissipate typically? It is wasting, it is removing, it is taking it away. If you are running a pump here trying to push this fluid through, you are paying money, you are spending energy to give it the maximum velocity possible so that the fluid will flow. The fluid will flow at your desired speed. Shear stress is a show spoiler. Shear stress comes in and takes away energy from the flow that should have ideally been carried by the fluid particles, that should have ideally been transmitted through the flow. So shear stress is kind of like if you are dissipating a lot of energy, then whatever you pay for here doesn't get to the fluid. Okay, I'm not saying that is good or bad. What I'm saying is shear stress's role is to steal energy from the flow, which is what we call as dissipated. So you have kinetic energy of the fluid and you have viscous dissipation, which I'll write tau scales with mu, this scales with mu v over d multiplied by the volume. Mu v over d multiplied by the volume. So I am saying the fluid has kinetic energy that's proportional to rho delta v squared. The fluid loses energy through viscous dissipation proportional to mu v over d times delta v. Okay, so I don't want to do a comparison. I want to do a comparison of the kinetic energy of the fluid to the energy dissipated by fluid shearing. I want to compare the kinetic energy of the fluid to the energy dissipated by fluid shearing. Why does shearing happen? That is a more basic question. If you had a flow, the presence of the pipe wall is the origin for low velocity fluid. It has zero velocity, the fluid has zero velocity at the pipe wall. So that is the source where this dissipation starts. This layer of fluid that is attached to the wall, which is at rest, pulls back on the previous layer. Okay? When this layer is trying to flow this way, it is being held back by this layer, so it is slowed down a little bit. The next layer, which is trying to flow, is slowed down by the previous layer. The next layer is being slowed down by the previous layer, all the way to the center line, where the center line is being slowed down by the previous layer, and this again is symmetric. It happens on the other side of the pipe as well. So this shearing is basically the fluid being slowed down by the wall, and that causes dissipation. That is, when molecules are being pulled back, they kind of rub on each other, and what they end up doing is they heat up, they cause frictional heating, and that energy that is going through the fluid, that was supplied by the pump, that energy input that should have gone here has now reduced by a certain amount, because this certain amount has left the system as heat or as irrecoverable energy that is no longer with the fluid, but it went from the fluid through the molecules to the wall, and ultimately it is dissipated from the wall as heat or radiated away as heat. So if we do a comparison between the kinetic energy of the fluid and the energy dissipated by shear stress, I'm going to take these two here. I'm going to take rho delta V times V squared divided by mu V over D times delta V. Okay? So I can strike out delta V that appears because both the kinetic energy and the energy dissipated by viscous shear, they are both proportional to the volume of the tiny blob. If your blob is smaller or bigger, they scale accordingly. So I can strike that out. So if I simplify this, I have rho V D over mu. So I'll write Ke divided by dissipated energy. I don't have a term for it, I'll just call it dissipated energy. And turns out that is equal to rho Vd over mu, which is what we define as the Reynolds number. So Reynolds number itself is interpreted as the ratio of fluid kinetic energy to shear energy. If your kinetic energy is more, Reynolds number will be higher. If your viscous dissipation is more, you will have Reynolds number to be lower. So Reynolds number itself is a marker for the relative importance of fluid kinetic energy and shear energy. It's a very important statement in fluid mechanics. It is a marker for the relative importance of fluid kinetic energy and shear energy. A Reynolds number that is very high, that is much larger than 1, means the flow is dominated by the kinetic energy of the fluid flow whose Reynolds number is around 1 means that a flow that is influenced by both fluid kinetic energy and viscous shear. And a flow whose Reynolds number is much less than 1 implies a flow that is dominated by shear forces and viscous dissipation. So we have a big taxonomy of the flows based on Reynolds number, and you have Reynolds number that is equal to rho Vd over mu being much larger than 1, about 1, much less than 1. And from scaling analysis, what we learned is that the Reynolds number itself can be determined by any combination of these four. You could have a very large velocity that leads to a high Reynolds number. You could have a reasonably small velocity but a very large diameter. Like for example, if you are considering the flow over an entire aircraft, d is it's like 200 feet. Your velocity could be small, d could be high, making Reynolds number high. You could have a lot of combinations that lead to the same Reynolds number, but once you calculate Reynolds number, the effect of the flow is captured. The effect of relative importance of kinetic energy to shear energy is captured by the Reynolds number. Now continuing along that reasoning, for a pipe flow with a certain velocity, of a fluid with density rho and viscosity mu and average velocity v flowing through a pipe whose diameter is d, okay, it is known